On This Week in Enterprise Tech, how can AI be weaponized to spread disinformation? We talk about how its potential to change the future. Plus, Curtis also talks about how email is a minefield for security worries for the enterprise. Plus, Heather, Curtis, and I talk with Claude Aiken, President and CEO of WISPA, about fixed wireless providers and rural broadband. Twiet on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twiet, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 345, recorded June 7th, 2019. WISPA, Broadband for All. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian software powers the full spectrum of collaboration between IT teams and the rest of your organization. Visit Atlassian.com/IT to see what IT can be by giving their products a try for free. And by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Find the right people for your business this year at linkedin.com/thisweek and get $50 off your first job post. And by Grammarly. Grammarly is a communication tool that helps people improve their writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. Start writing confidently by going to grammarly.com/enterprise and get 20% off a Grammarly premium account today. Welcome to Twiet, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Lou MARESCA, your guide through this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need some help from some of the top enterprise tech professionals in the industry, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, what's keeping you busy there in the Sunshine State?
Well, trying to dodge rainstorms and keep writing about security. Between those two things, I'm pretty well booked up these days.
Now, you're a post-interop here, right? What's your next big thing? Where are you traveling next?
Well, we're already starting the big run-up to Black Hat and DEF CON. I'll be writing some preview articles about that, talking to some of the people who will be giving presentations. Giving a little bit of a sneak peek there, and trying to get my dance card in order. It's funny. I'm already getting people who want to set up meetings, and we're a good 2 months out. But that's the way these big shows go.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that coverage. Well, speaking of experts, we have another expert on our co-host panel, and that is Heather Williams from Solution Architect from Ruckus Networks. Heather, welcome back to the show. Great to have you back.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So what's cooking for you this past week, and what's upcoming for you for travel as well?
Yeah, well, actually, I just got home late last night. I drove up from Austin. I spent the week down there with my good friends from Palo Alto for their Ignite conference. It was a great conference. It was huge. I think they doubled the size that they were anticipating. Got to meet Joseph Menn. He gave a talk, and he's got a new book, The Cult of the Dead Cow. And I managed not to fangirl too much over him, and so I didn't embarrass myself too much. But so I'm going to be recovering from the con cough that I picked up from there. And like Curtis, I'm going to be ramping up for Black Hat. Maybe he'll fit me into his dance card.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we're going to get some great coverage from Black Hat, I think, with everyone going there. So that's fantastic.
Well, it will certainly have good Wi-Fi.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, we have a great show today. Not only that, we're talking a little bit about AI and how maybe it could be weaponized, as well as we all use email. It can really be a minefield of security worries. So we'll have to talk about that. Plus, we have a great guest, Claude Aiken from WISPA, to talk about the expansion of wireless broadband networks. But before we get into all that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, you might have heard of Snopes. It's that service that does fact-checking on news widely across the internet. And if you were worried about stories spreading rumors across the internet, Snopes has been there to debunk them for you. Now, people start their morning sometimes looking at that continually updated list, Hot 50 list that Snopes maintains. It shows their active investigations into widespread rumors. Snopes has also been battling fake news for years, but unfortunately, Snopes has another battle eating away at their existence, a legal one. Now, your minds might be wandering a bit and thinking that, hey, they're battling large networks and news conglomerates. Nope, that's not true. It's unfortunately less compelling than that. Since 2017, the co-founder of Snopes, David Mickelson, has been fighting a former business associate over the control of Snopes. That's right, it's over a civil dispute here. Now, David is being accused of financial management, conspiracy, and embezzlement. He is charged with, among other things, using company funds for lavish vacations while he in turn levels accusations of fraud. Now, the legal dispute has been pretty costly over the last 2 years, and the team is even going as far as asking for help on their GoFundMe page, which almost actually has $1 million on there. Now, even though Snopes has a worthy cause in targeting companies and fake news over the many years, it also has a weak link, and that seems to be David. Now, this story is stories of investors, politics, and greed. It might just be a pretty exciting movie one day. Let's see how it plays out.
Well, Cisco is interested in the IoT, and it's just bought itself some visibility. Cisco has announced its intention to purchase Centrio, a French company focused on device visibility and security for industrial controlled system networks. According to Cisco, the addition of Centrio's products and technologies will allow it to provide deeper visibility into IoT devices for security and performance purposes. Liz Santoni, a senior vice president and general manager of Cisco IoT, told me that Cisco's 65,000 plus IoT customers are all in different stages of deployment, but most share a need to precisely understand just what is attached to their IoT network or their OT, operational technology network, in the industrial control speak. They need to do this so they can take the next step into proper segmentation for security. Now, the reason IT has trouble solving this whole visibility problem is that they don't talk the protocols. There are more than 3,500 different, often proprietary protocols in use over in the OT space, and Centrio, well, it has put in the time and the effort to understand those protocols so that customers can identify the devices that are attaching to their network and the protocols they're speaking. Centrio's products are focused on industrial control systems rather than the IoT of, say, wearable technology and smart assistants. And over time, Cisco plans to integrate Centrio's products with the Cisco DNA Center and Identity Service Engine to allow more control and segmentation, along with greater integration of OT system control into traditional IT operations.
The rise of ransomware. In her latest article, Kelly Jackson Higgins, an executive editor at Dark Reading, talks about the ransomware attack on the city of Baltimore. Researchers at the security firm Armor have been able to confirm that the Twitter account used to deliver extortion demands is controlled by the same person or persons behind the May Robinhood ransomware campaign that has locked down the city's servers. The city has so far been steadfast about not paying the ransom demands of more than $17,000 per system, which works out to a little over $76,000, payable in Bitcoin. And the tweets from the attackers seem to indicate they're losing patience. The attack, which started almost a month ago, has disrupted real estate transactions, bill payments, and services such as email and telecommunications, and has already cost Baltimore more than $18 million. The same ransomware recently hit the city of Greenville, North Carolina, as well as several power companies in India last month. And to date, at least 22 state and local governments across the U.S. have been hit by ransomware. This brings to mind the DDoS extortion attacks that against the offshore gambling websites that happened in the early 2000s. But it really does beg the question, haven't these guys ever heard of a disaster recovery plan?
Now, for William Montanez, getting stopped by the police was a common affair due to his past history of marijuana possession charges. But, however, last June, an interesting set of events conspired here. Now, this time, the police saw captivating notifications popping up on his two phones, making them think he was plotting to do something even more wrong than his possession. Now, when they asked him to unlock his phones, he refused. He was sent to jail for the possession charges, bailed out, and only to be jailed again in contempt of court due to refusing to unlock his phones. Now, 44 more days he spent behind bars before all the charges were dropped, except for the misdemeanor possession charge, and he was free to go. Now, what would you do in that situation? Would you fold and unlock the phones in fear of jail time? Now, this story reflects growing resistance to law enforcement's power to peer into Americans' digital lives. Now, the leading portals into that activity are cell phones, which are basically protected from prying eyes by encryption with passcodes, which being the only way in. Now, when it's in such stressful situations, most citizens actually fold under that pressure. Law enforcement could take the advantage of that situation. Now, courts have determined that police actually do need a warrant to search for a cell phone, but under duress, most people give in. Now, with the advent of backdoors to systems being discussed with Apple and Google for law enforcement and governments around the world, the issue continues to rise in the event in the civil aspect, using coercion techniques to peer into the private data. Now, what about biometrics? Well, shouldn't that be even more protected? Well, the law has generally been interpreted as protecting data that someone possesses, including the contents of their mind, such as passcodes, but not necessarily their physical traits, such as thumbprints. At the borders, the laws are a bit more lenient, with authorities using hundreds of thousands of dollars of third-party hacking tools to actually unlock devices. If security and privacy were important topics for you, now is the time to start paying attention.
Well, speaking of privacy, Apple made encrypted data easy on iOS devices. Developers responded by turning it off. When a computing platform has a security feature built in, why would a developer decide not to use it? A better question might be, why would more than 20,000 iOS apps be published without an Apple encryption feature that's turned on by default? Those are among the questions researchers at Wandera sought to answer when they analyzed more than 30,000 commonly used iOS apps found in the App Store. They found that App Transport Security, or ATS, which is a set of rules and app extensions Apple provides as part of the Swift development platform, is turned off and not used by a majority of the app developers they saw. Researchers say they believe many developers disable ATS because they feel it's going to impact app performance. Those concerns, they say, comes from legacy servers and mobile devices that had limited CPUs. Today's systems can easily handle HTTPS anywhere. Other developers disable ATS because they depend on ad networks for revenues for free apps. Many of those ad networks, including those from Facebook, rely on unencrypted connections to do that voodoo they do. Until Apple or customers force developers to enable encryption for sensitive data transmission in all of their apps, it seems there's going to continue to be a real market for VPNs because they may be the only way corporations and consumers can be sure their personally identifiable information remains private.
The war on Huawei and the rule of unintended consequences. As part of Washington's ongoing targeting of Huawei for special treatment, last month the U.S. Department of Commerce added Huawei and 70 of its affiliates to the so-called Entity List, which will prevent the telecom giant from buying parts and components from U.S. companies without approval from Washington. As a result, several global standards groups have restricted Huawei's access. The Wi-Fi Alliance, which sets the standards for wireless technology, has temporarily restricted Huawei's participation. The SD Association, which is known for developing the standards of the SD memory cards, removed Huawei from its membership list. And Huawei has voluntarily withdrawn its membership in the Joint Electron Device Engineering Council, which sets semiconductor standards. While this does not mean that Huawei can't develop those products, as those standards are open to the whole industry, but it does mean that they won't have a say on the debate on standards for future technology development as long as its membership is suspended or curtailed. This is a blow because industry players fight to influence technology development in their favor. Many of Huawei's U.S. and non-U.S. suppliers have suspended deliveries to Huawei, and tech stocks have taken a hit over the uncertainty this is causing. In the meantime, Huawei has characterized these as unreasonable restrictions, and industry observers warn that Chinese tech firms have become such an integral part in the global economy that severing ties with Huawei will do harm to 5G advancement worldwide.
Now, this past week, people around the world were feeling the effects of a Google outage. Now, some thought it was the age-old BGP issue. Some thought it was hackers, maybe even malware. What if I told you Google's cloud had a blip, but it was nothing more than DevOps that was in their way to having service availability? Well, would you be unimpressed? Well, a perfect storm as a result of a couple configuration changes that propagated through the network combined with a software bug triggered an automatic shutdown of different parts of their network, creating a network bottleneck. Now, due to the deployment issue, management traffic was shut down to conserve latency, deprioritizing the ability to actually propagate a fix across the network. Now, the most systems would panic and shut down, but not Google. They had a set of priority queues that started to drop unimportant, more extensive, less latency sensitive traffic to ensure that the bottlenecks lessens and the critical data could flow. Now, let's put this into perspective a little bit. Now, Google Cloud lost nearly 1/3 of its traffic that day. It affected Shopify and Snapchat. 1% of Gmail users couldn't get their email. Google Search felt a bit of sputter in its performance. Plus, YouTube even lost 2.5% of views in 1 hour. Now, imagine trying to debug this issue, because it's almost a double-edged sword here, because tools and management traffic were actually deprioritized on the network. And then it made it hard to debug the problem because they had to compete with more critical traffic. Now, 3 hours into it, Google found a way to propagate a new configuration fix, and the network started to recover. Now, there is actually a lesson there for all of us. If this can happen to Google, which is a huge cloud and services provider, it can happen to anyone. For your organization, it might be the year for DevOps. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the bites. But before we get there, we have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Atlassian. Now, whether you are an engineer, an IT team, or somebody wants to manage a really large team of work items, you probably have used Atlassian products, one or two of them here and there. I can remember back in 2002, Atlassian launched their perfectly timed product in that emerging agile market. Originally, it was just a bug tracking tool, but that Jira ticket quickly became the digital record of choice for tracking units of work in that highly collaborative and agile environment. Now, fast forward 16 years, DevOps is on everyone's docket, and Atlassian is still leading the pack in those areas to help IT teams rise to the occasion. Now, for me, I've been using Bitbucket for many, many years to manage all of my source code projects and documentation. Plus, tickets to those projects come through automatically. I'm alerted through Jira and alerted through my Microsoft Teams channel. It's really useful and makes me easy to actually act on those things. Now, Atlassian really is the collaboration software company that empowers IT teams around the world. Now, think about this. Like all organizations, you want to ship products faster, more efficient, and with high quality. Plus, you want to ensure your customers' feedback kind of adds value to your business as well. So sometimes businesses kind of fall short because, they have disjointed workflows. And this is where Atlassian comes to save the day. They give you, your organization, the power to manage complex collaborations. Atlassian provides that technology backbone to help modern IT organizations plan, service, and support the kind of change that propels businesses forward. Now, Atlassian offers an affordable, reliable suite of tools for teams of all sizes, for DevOps to Agile, IT apps to Ops, to ITSM, and whatever comes next for your organization. Now, with the Jira software, Confluence, Bitbucket, Atlassian forms that backbone of effective cross-team project planning and organization, as well as communication. Now, with Jira Ops, Opsgenie, and Status Page, they help teams to better direct incidents, alert response teams, coordinate response efforts to resolve issues faster, and keep customers or stakeholders up to date. Now, your teams can choose tools that are right for your current framework and workflow, while that you can actually trust as you grow, they will grow with you. Now, like all Atlassian products, the tools for your IT team are easy and free to try. Just head to Atlassian.com/IT to find out which Atlassian offering is right for your team. Try Atlassian today to see what IT can be. That's Atlassian.com/IT. And we thank Atlassian for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, as we've heard from technology leaders around the world, the fourth industrial revolution is in effect, and it's because of artificial intelligence. Now, technology advances in AI have made it possible for vast amounts of innovation around the world. Now, what if it meant that you couldn't tell the difference between a human or a machine when reading an article? What about music? Well, OpenAI, a nonprofit AI research company backed by the likes of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Reid Hoffman, has built an AI model called GP2, which can generate conditional synthetic text samples of unparalleled quality, indistinguishable by the human eye. Now, GPT-2 generates synthetic text samples in response to a model being primed with arbitrary input. Now, the model is chameleon-like. It actually adapts to the style and content of a conditioning text. Now, this allows the user to generate realistic and coherent continuations about a topic of their choosing. Now, with this advancement, what if it could be weaponized? Now, in 2017, an online disinformation campaign spread against the White Helmets, claiming that the group of aid volunteers was serving as an arm of Western governments to broadcast unrest in Syria. Now, this false information was convincing, but the Russian organization behind the campaign ultimately gave itself away because it repeated the same text across many different fake news sites. Now, people could see right through that. Now, what if it wasn't that case? What if it was generated by AI? AI can help governments, companies, and organizations spread disinformation far more efficiently rather than hire human workers to write and distribute propaganda. These organizations can lean on machines to compose believable and varied content at an enormous scale. Now, a fake Facebook post seen by millions, in effect, could be tailored to political leanings with a simple tweak. Now, this is a very interesting, obviously. I want to bring my co-hosts in and get what their thoughts are in here. Now, Curtis, researchers really have already shown that machines can generate images and sounds really that are undistinguishable from the real thing. Will we see a real problem here when it comes to news and other factoids?
Oh, absolutely. And we're already seeing news articles, print articles, if you will, that are being generated by AI. There are any number of companies that will basically provide news as a service. If you want to start up your own news-ish site, they can fill it up for you and you never really have to employ a single human being. What we're finding, though, is that while we have become accustomed to treating the written word with some degree of skepticism, for the last, say, 200 years, we've pretty much trusted what we've been able to see in still images and moving images. Some of that is due to technology. I mean, it's been very difficult to this point in time to do a credible job at faking what was in one of those formats. And part of it has been behavioral. There are standards for photojournalists and video journalists that legitimate news organizations force their shooters to adhere to. I mean, if you do as much as cropping out a bird or a stray power line, that's a fireable offense. What you show in a news site or a news story must be essentially what was there. Now, what we're seeing now is the ability to create the appearance of reality in both still and moving images, and we don't have the behavioral mechanisms that tell us we should doubt that. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here, because one of the consequences is the tendency to trust nothing, and that's not workable any more than trusting everything is workable. What we have to figure out is a mechanism to tell us who and what can be trusted and why, and then use that to separate the news level chaff from the wheat.
Absolutely. I do want to get to peer into that looking glass. I want you to peer in pretty soon. But before we do that, I want to ask Heather. Heather, could this basically spark maybe new markets? Like we've heard of Snopes, they're manually kind of going through and sifting through news stories and they're trying to debunk things. But this almost sounds like this could be done at scale, right? This could be done where AI can produce false news and make it sound and feel like a human wrote it, and then change it and post it everywhere. Could this basically spark a new market for maybe a new set of tooling and other AI to detect this, maybe?
I think absolutely it will, and actually would be surprised if somebody's not already working on something like that. It's funny because, and I think Curtis had some really good points about the way it's being used and how it's already being used. I sort of would, if we can just for a second focus a little bit on the positive side. I mean, let's face it, we're never going to have to see never going to see a Marvel movie that doesn't include, Mr. Lee, because they've scanned him and they're able to insert him. And so there are some good sides to this. There's always the nature of, things, technology can be abused as well. And it already clearly has been. But I think whatever this tool or tools or industry that ends up looking like for however it is that we're going to be able to, as Curtis says, distill the chaff and not have to just disbelieve everything. And by the way, what's going to happen in the future to that phrase? Who you're going to believe, me or your lying eyes? But I don't know what this is going to end up looking like. But we always, innovation comes from adversity. So there's going to be something that's going to have to develop this and help, because what we're going to be fighting against is the biology and evolution that humans have evolved to be pattern recognizers. So we're going to have to find a way to make that work into the being able to distill the real images from the doctored images. How they're going to do it, it makes me I guess a little bit happy for mortality, because I have no idea how this smarter, younger generation is going to solve this problem.
All right. So interesting thing. I'm curious, I want to throw this back to you and kind of get into like, how do you think it should be solved? Because some people in the chat room, like Specs, saying, hey, you know what? I already don't trust some random news sites. I only go to the ones that I've trusted for years. Is that what's going to have to happen? I mean, obviously, there's always news sites popping up all over the place. People writing blog posts and posting on Facebook and Twitter. Is it really where we're going to have to start going to, kind of like identity providers? We're going to have to start going to news providers that only are trusted and secured in the day forward. Is that how we're going to battle it, or is there other ways?
Well, one line of argument says, yes, that's what we need to do. Go to those sites that are trusted. Go to trusted sources of information. And be much more skeptical about sources that we don't have that trust relationship with. The problem with that is that for a lot of reasons that have been the subject of a great deal of research, we tend to trust those news organizations that reinforce our biases. So what we end up with is what's popularly called the echo chamber. We trust the sources that tell us the things that reinforce our worldview, that tell us essentially what we want to hear. We exclude those that tell us anything else. And as a result, we simply become more ossified in our opinions. We cut ourselves off from new lines of inquiry. We cut ourselves off from new sources of information. And that has all kinds of bad consequences, some of which we're beginning to see, say, in this country now. I think what we need instead of that is to teach an information literacy in the same way that we have taught young people to be literate in the written word, in the spoken word, in mathematics. These are basic forms of literacy. We need to teach a news or an information literacy. How do you objectively look at something that you're being told and try to decide whether it's reasonable, whether it's rational, whether it's trustworthy? Does it pass what many engineers like to call the sniff test. Does it smell bad when you look at it? Does it use inflammatory language? Does it present facts or present as facts things that objectively can't be true, often with numbers that inflate something to the point that we know that it just couldn't be happening that way? So there are nations that are starting to teach that in school, and I think that that's something that we should be doing. Until then, though, it's going to be a real struggle because you have what is not just a fact-based argument, but one that pits philosophy against philosophy. And as we know, those are wars that tend to be particularly bloody.
Indeed. Some great suggestions there, Curtis. Absolutely. So, Heather, I wanted to throw one more question over to you, and you touched a little bit about on unintended consequences to technology like this in the past. What do you think is going to come up? I mean, obviously, AI is really helping the industry and the world, big data, analytics, providing ways to invent and move forward in innovation. But there's always unintended consequences, right? I mean, we're seeing that, hey, encryption there's like governments trying to create backdoors. Backdoors have unintended consequences. What about this? Where's AI going to take us to? Where do you think it could take us in a good way, and where do you think it could take us in a bad way?
Right, and I think we've covered a lot of the bad ways, but remember there's always the flip side too. One of the unintended consequences about the space program was we got Velcro. So I mean, there's always a flip side. And before I finish that thought, I want to go back real quick to something Curtis said because and a comment that I made in the chat room. I mean, information literacy and critical thinking skills for the win. That we can almost make that a title of this week's show, I think. But I got to tell you, let's look at it from the positive side. One of the unintended consequences. I now have added to my bucket list. If any of you guys are a fan of Dennis E. Taylor, he's a sci-fi writer. He has a set of books called the Bobaverse. My new bucket list item is to, be cryogenically frozen, and I'll wake up in a couple hundred years as an AI. And I get to spend the rest of my life being a von Neumann probe and discovering the universe. So that's my prediction. One of us is going to get to do that.
Fantastic. All right, well, I want to throw it over to Curtis because he has a great bite. Talk a little about how obviously we all use email. How is it actually causing enterprises, organizations problems here?
Well, one of the big ways is that, as we all know, any service or system that's in use by the vast majority of organizations is going to become an attack vector for criminals. Sure enough, that's where email finds itself now, and it's happening to a point that many people are questioning whether email has passed its usable lifespan. Employee email accounts are prime targets for fraudsters, phishing attacks, and malware delivery, as hackers assume every click, download, or response might be a way for a victim to fall into their trap. There's even a phrase for it, BEC, business email compromise, that security researchers use to talk about a huge swath of what goes on. Now, the threats causing concern are far from new. In fact, they are among the oldest cybersecurity threats. And Cisco researchers point out in their new report, email, click with caution, spam is 40 years old and phishing is over 30 years old. Over time, they've grown in prevalence and sophistication, joined by malware and fraud as criminals find new ways to cause problems for security practitioners and the people they're supposed to protect. The thing is, email has been around for a long time, and we're still struggling to protect it. That is, according to some researchers, absolutely incredible. Things are not getting better, according to researchers like Ben Monroe, who's director of Cisco Security. He says, in fact, things are getting worse. The problem is that email, using the same structure that makes it useful for businesses, has a structure that's almost perfect for scammers. Employees are forced to read every message, make judgment calls about what they receive, and decide what to open, click, download, and respond to. The right amount of social engineering can manipulate recipients into accidentally letting attackers in. Now, more than half of CISOs say that defending against user behavior is very or extremely challenging. Now, Monroe cites Cisco's 2019 CISO benchmarking study, where it says that only 51% of these CISOs say that they're doing an excellent job managing employee security. Users often get a bad reputation, but let's face it, it's tough when cyber criminals have the advantage and they're using something that is so prevalent in the industry. So it's not fair for everyone to criticize users for doing what users have to do. And let's admit it, we've all criticized users. Employees have to answer emails, even if it's an email that says it's from their boss and it actually came from their hacker. We don't need to tell them that it's their fault because they're not sophisticated when their attackers are exceptionally sophisticated. So what's a CISO to do? The challenge lies in its commonality. The mundane nature of email makes it seem less threatening and makes it in reality very threatening. Now, how can you tell? What are some warning signs? One of them is a sense of urgency. Anything that comes across demanding immediate action, well, it's time to throttle back a little bit. Act with caution. If the URL looks fishy, and many of those are out there, and I will admit it, as someone who works around the security industry, I see all kinds of truly bizarre looking URLs. My favorite recent one was the announcement of the malware called ThrangryCat, which is pronounced ThrangryCat, even though the URL itself is 3 cat head emojis followed by .com. Unusual file types. We know .doc, we know .xml, we know all kinds of things, but if a file type comes across that you haven't seen before, it's time to get the security team to give it a look over. Now, I want to bring my co-host into this because I know they have a lot of experience from different angles than I do. And Lou, I'm going to start with you. We've been hearing for some time that because of all these problems, email is dead. Now, you work in and around office productivity suites. Is email dead? And if it's not, why does it remain such a vital part of business communications?
It's definitely not dead. In fact, I think one of the big things, actually sit next to the Outlook crew here, like I think the interesting thing is that, you know, email, because of its just critical mass, like I think the industry has found over the years that it's one of the most kind of, I wouldn't say reliable, but it's a reliable source because everyone seems to have it, use it. Even my 90-year-old grandmother uses it. I think that the key here is there's a heterogeneous way of communicating in this world today. You have, you know, Slack and Teams and Facebook and social networks and all of these different kind of mediums. But what kind of remains the same that everyone has, everyone has an address to, is email. And I think the critical mass is there to keep it going. And I think the chat room brings up some good topics about like how are they improving the technology. And obviously, I think in this ways, you know, security is improving. You touched a little bit on how organizations are using machine learning and other tactics to discover things that could be attacks, malware. It could be phishing attacks, that kind of thing. Plus, they're also educating their users a little bit better. But really, email is still the vital lifeblood of a lot of organizations. You know, having come from the CRM group here, I can tell you, actually owning the Outlook integration and Gmail integration there, I can tell you that organizations thrive, especially sales organizations, customer service thrive on the email medium to be able to support and move forward their products. And so I think, it's definitely not going away anytime soon. Now, whether there can be improvements here, absolutely. I think being able to scale the services out, security, making things more private, encryption, that kind of thing can definitely be done there, as well as providing updated services to handle campaigns against organizations like malware and phishing attacks. So we'll see where it goes, but I definitely think, just like iOS has today and Android, it's really the critical mass on the platform and on the protocol that's really kind of pushing it forward. I'm hoping that it'll improve soon.
Well, I think we're all hoping that. Heather, I want to turn to you. You work with a lot of different groups, and like me, you work remotely. Have you seen any technologies, any chat forums, any sort of message base that you think could legitimately replace email in a business context?
Yes, and in fact, I'll be honest. I've been listening to the two of you talk, and I've just been thinking about this. I'm not sure that email is going away because of security problems, and not that it's going away, but I don't think that it's being used less because of security problems. I think it's just, and certainly I was on vacation last week, so talk about triaging my inbox when I came back. I got to do a better job of writing rules. I'll tell you that. I've got, 650 emails now in my inbox, and that's after having worked yesterday to try to get that number down. But I find more and more that my team that I work with, and then groups of teams that I work with, both in Ruckus and then with the other organizations, we use email more for the cherry on the sundae, or for to put a dot on it, or actually maybe just to set up the meeting in Outlook so that it's got you've kept up your calendar. I got to tell you, I'm a heavy Slack user. If the few times we've had a Slack outage, I've had to actually go back and get some real work done. But I just on my phone, I think I'm part of 10 Slack channels, spaces, and I just have to flip back and forth, and that's for various companies. Black Hat, we have the NOC team has a Slack group. ITDRC, I have a Slack group for them, and I'm even part of a Slack group it's a group of women that do CTFs together. So to me, Slack has become my de facto cooperating tool for, and that one for us has had the critical mass that Lou was talking about. So I use email less and less, and more for just finishing out a conversation that may have taken place originally across different Slack channels.
Well, Slack is one of those things that I also use, and there are similar things, similar products from Microsoft, from Cisco, from others. But Lou, I want to come back to you with a question. When you look at this problem, and obviously you have spent some time thinking about it, you talked about AI, machine learning, things like that, but in the, let's say, next couple of years, do you see some technologies out there that really do promise a solid boost up for defenders and legitimate users of email? Or is the solution to wait until some combination of messaging services and SharePoint take away the need for us to throw files around by email at all?
That's a good question. I think file services by secured providers are definitely a good alternative. I know definitely here at Microsoft, that's the way we do it. You attach something. It's not directly attached to the email. It actually goes through security scans, and then gets posted somewhere that you actually have to download. So I think, that's definitely one way to do it. And organizations should be already doing something like that. Allows them to audit things that are coming in, allows to audit things going out. I think that's a really big tactic to kind of go against this kind of issue that's coming in. But there's lots of things that can happen to email. And obviously going forward, a lot of the latest email servers today are reducing their footprint and allowing for them to be more secure by the fact that they have a smaller footprint and they do less so that they can actually secure more. And there's also a lot of tools out there. So a lot of people are having email integrations that will not only integrate at the server level, but also at the user or client level, where when you get an email, it allows you to provide insights into what the content of that email and whether it's important to you, whether it could be malicious, whether it could be so it's kind of an endpoint technology, but also there's the way to secure it in transit. So like if there's many things going around right now, there's some things in the industry that are suggesting, hey, we need to do more than just this simple encryption that could be potentially broken. We need to encrypt better. We need to have better standards here, so that when you do send something, the person who gets it knows that it came from the person they expected it came from, hasn't been tampered with, and so on. So there's definitely some movement there as well. But will it go away? I mean, I don't think so. I think messaging services are important. They're just in time. They're more immediate than email sometimes. But I don't think it'll go away. I think there's already a critical mass there. It's already very effective for businesses. And will messaging help? Probably. But will it go away? Probably not for a long time. We're talking maybe 20, 30 years. So I definitely think that the industry needs to grow and there's some improvements coming down the pipe. But of course, so with anything, we need to just target specific things, and hopefully that'll happen.
Well, I do hope that it gets better, because the timeline you've laid out takes email through the rest of my career, at least, and actually through most of my son's career, and that just seems sad. It seems unlikely that we're going to stop talking about this anytime soon, but for now, we're going to wrap this up because we have a great guest. I'm going to turn it back over to Lou for, I believe, a reference to a great sponsor, and then getting on to what I know is a great guest.
Thanks, Curtis. Absolutely. We do have a great sponsor, and that is LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Now, let me ask you a question. Where are all the professionals at? Well, you know, they're on LinkedIn. And if you already are ready to hire for your small business or your enterprise, you naturally want to find the best person for the job. And odds are that person is on LinkedIn. Now, it's the world's largest professional network. 70% of the U.S. workforce is on LinkedIn. Some of the biggest names in the industry post there every day, their content. I post their jobs, interests, technology, everything. My professional network wouldn't be the same without LinkedIn. Now, that just goes to show you that LinkedIn can really help your business as well. Post your job where people go every day to make connections, grow in their career, and discover job opportunities. Now, you've used other sites, I'm sure of that, and most likely they just don't feel right to you. They're clunky, plus their responses to the jobs are really not from the right people. What I have seen from job postings on LinkedIn is that LinkedIn jobs are matched based on skills and background. But there's that secret sauce recipe by also matching based off of interests, activities, and passions as well. Now, that's pretty impressive, because what does that mean for your business? Well, it means that LinkedIn will match you quickly with a group of the most relevant, qualified candidates for the job that you're looking to fill. Now, that way you can really focus on the candidates you want to spend time talking to and make a quality hire that you can actually be truly excited about. Now, if you think about it, there are 500 million pros on LinkedIn every day. LinkedIn is the best way to get your job opportunity in front of the right people. It gives you the tools to target the next generation workforce with laser precision. Now, I bet you would be surprised to know that a new hire is made every 8 seconds using LinkedIn. I've used them in the past. It's amazing and a fast way to scale your talent acquisition using LinkedIn. To get $50 off your first job post, go to linkedin.com/thisweek. That's linkedin.com/thisweek to get $50 off your first job post. linkedin.com/thisweek. Terms and conditions apply. And we thank LinkedIn for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now my favorite part of the show. We get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today we have Claude Aiken, President and CEO of WISPA, or Wireless Internet Service Providers Association. Welcome to the show, Claude.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Claude, our audience, they love origin stories and people's kind of journey through the tech industry. Can you maybe take us through your career and how you kind of ended up at WISPA?
Yeah, sure. I think I stuck my toes in the tech water in college. I got a laptop when I started college. By about sophomore, junior year, the thing was not quite as good as it used to be. And also being in college, I was kind of a cheap guy. So I figured out it was easier and cheaper to build a computer than it was to buy a new one. So I built my own computer. First job out of college, I worked for a small law firm, and the managing partner there was like, "Hey, can you build us some computers as well? And oh, by the way, can you network our two offices together securely with a VPN?" I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I can figure that out." That sort of started a very a long romance with technology and the law. Went to law school with a technology focus, worked for the Federal Communications Commission for almost a decade in a variety of roles, and now here aboard at WISPA in the rural broadband world.
Fantastic. Now let's get into that a little bit. What can you maybe just tell us a little bit? Give us a primer of what WISPA is and what you're trying to do.
Sure. So WISPA is the voice of the fixed wireless industry here in the United States of America. So, you think about, when you're thinking about broadband distribution technologies, you think of fiber, you think of mobile wireless, you think of satellite. One of the distribution technologies that is less well known is fixed wireless. So it kind of functions like a mixture of mobile wireless and satellite, but you can operate with the speeds of fiber depending on the technology. So you have wireless access points up on a tower. You have another a radio on the customer premise equipment that on the customer premise that talks back and forth. And that's the technology that our members use. We have about 800 of them. Mostly are small rural mom and pop shops who started up, either put their life savings on the line or went into credit card debt just because they were frustrated with the lack of good internet service in their community. And then they got themselves some. Then their neighbor's neighbor started asking for service, and they grew a business out of that. And those are the folks that we represent. We try to help them out with education. We host a couple of trade shows every year. We help them out with advocacy in DC and in state houses across the country. And just providing an opportunity for folks to get together and to learn from each other and help each other out as they try to provide better service to their customers.
Fantastic. So you kind of briefly touched on it, and there are obviously some challenges here, especially with some of the commissions that are out there right now. They're kind of driving policy. What are you seeing the major challenges for WISPA right now?
Yeah, so every couple of years, someone will do a survey of folks in our industry, and the two biggest challenges tend to come out always as access to spectrum and access to capital. And the former is something that we try to help a lot with. Historically, the way that spectrum policy has been done in the United States tends to work for a business model of mobile wireless. So, and even as a subset of that, the largest national players. So you think if you're thinking about, licensed spectrum tends to be auctioned off in giant geographic areas. So, makes sense for someone who's Wall Street funded, who's looking for a nationwide footprint. Doesn't make sense for someone who has 500 subscribers in rural Nebraska to acquire something like that. So a lot of our members will get started on unlicensed spectrum, so same spectrum that's used for Wi-Fi. But the downside there is you don't have any sort of interference protection. But we tend to work pretty well together with the folks on the Wi-Fi side of the house, and in advocating for better and more unlicensed spectrum.
Now, what are we talking about? Like how many like fixed access providers are there today in basically the whole United States?
Sure. So we estimate there's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. Most of them are really small, which is why none of them are really household names. Serve somewhere between 4 and 6 million Americans with broadband service, both on the residential and the enterprise side.
Got it. Now, you touched a little bit about on some of the challenges they have. What are fixed wireless providers? Are they driving their adoption based off of latest technology? You touched a little bit on that. Is maybe 5G driving this, or is there other things driving it as well?
Yeah, so a lot of our folks have been in operation for, the longest operator probably has been in business for about 30 years, and they were using, Motorola canopy gear back in the day. But radio technology has come a long way in the past decade or so, so that folks are able to offer, today speeds of 100 megabits over a fixed wireless link for mass market residential connections, and then gigabit plus for enterprise. So, on the enterprise side, what a number of our members will see is they'll start out, with the business as the redundant failover connection, and then they'll be asked to be the primary connection in sort of an SD-WAN kind of setup.
Makes sense. Well, this is definitely a juicy topic for my co-host, especially for Mo. Mo, I want to throw it over to you. I know you got some interesting topics to talk about.
Yes, this is definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart, since my connection to you guys today is going over my WISP's connection that is rock solid, and I absolutely love it. And before I started this relationship with the WISP that I have now, I did have my only option was satellite. Which obviously Twiat wasn't going across the satellite. I was actually jury rigging. I have a cellular booster out on my my balcony here, and I was tethering to one of my cellular devices. So you talked about the number of rural clients that are on these networks. I'd like people to have an understanding of the length and breadth, the amount of geography that would be rural and is basically relying on these WISPs in order to get any internet short of the satellite.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant swath of land, and it's limited only by the business case and the spectrum access. So, I was driving through, like from Spokane to Walla Walla, Washington last month, and, counting farmhouses around along the way, and looking both for satellite dishes and for WISP gear on roofs as I was passing it. So the provider that and member that I met up there had a territory of about 150 by 250 miles, and they're a small business with fewer than 30 employees. So they tend to cover a lot of ground, and that's one of the benefits of the technology, right? You don't have to run a wire to a house, and if you have decent spectrum access, you can beam a signal for several miles and still have pretty robust service in order to connect people whose choice is exactly like you said, Mo. Either expensive cellular data, or heavily throttled and unreliable satellite.
Right. Yeah. And I have so many questions that I'd like to talk with you about. We're absolutely just going to have you come back.
We'll have to. We'll come back. We'll do it offline. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. No. You're going to have to come back online too. That's for sure. So aside from the fact that these are small, and I did like the way you characterize these mom and pop organizations, because the other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that they're also operating on razor thin margins. This is just not nobody's doing this to get rich quick. and I will say this, that for a 3-county area, the only fiber that we have around here involves oatmeal. So I now have in this one little neighborhood off of this one tower, we have better internet access than anybody else in the entire 3-county area. But I actually have better rates now than I did when I lived in the suburbs of Dallas, and I had a fiber connection from AT&T. And that was just 2 years ago. So it's not that you really are getting something that's more as reliable, and even in some cases some better connectivity. You talked about the spectrum, access to spectrum, because the business case is obviously, if you build it, they will come and use it. And I characterize internet access like gas molecules. It will expand to fill any container that it's in. So however much you provide, people will find a way to use that connectivity. But what changes in access to spectrum are happening that are going to be able to help these? And you didn't use a number. It's 97% of the land mass of the U.S. that we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for filling in that number. But yeah, so a couple of things that we're hoping will come down the pike soon, and this is one thing that the Wi-Fi industry is excited about. And something that we're really excited about too is it looks like the FCC is going to open up about 1 gigahertz of spectrum in the 6 gigahertz spectrum band and make it available on an unlicensed basis, both for low power indoor use and a subsection of that for the higher power outdoor use that our members need to be able to provide the longer range fixed wireless service. One other issue that we're hopeful on and we're working on is a piece of spectrum called the C-band. So this is 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz, 500 megahertz of spectrum that's being used by satellite Earth stations to downlink content across the nation. And one of the nice things about fixed wireless is that we can share with these Earth stations. So imagine the country is a giant piece of Swiss cheese with these holes where these Earth stations need to be protected. Mobile wireless doesn't play well with those Earth stations. Fixed wireless can. So there's a huge amount of spectrum that's available that we can potentially take advantage of to provide, residential gigabit speed broadband over fixed wireless if that's made available in the right way.
And we do have a ton more to talk about here. We want to come back really quick. We do want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Grammarly. Now, there are tons of tools that you have, I'm sure, that you kind of keep coming back to over and over and over again. And for me, it's Grammarly. Now, not only does it help me write better content, but it also helps me getting my emails right too. Now, Grammarly will help you correct your writing skills by assisting in grammar, phrases, and sentences. It will literally evolve writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. Not only will the free version of Grammarly make you a better writer with its advanced review of critical spelling and grammar, but Grammarly Premium adds amazing features. In addition to spelling and grammar, Premium helps with advanced punctuation, structure, style within context, vocabulary suggestions, conciseness, readability for different occasions. Now, you can actually set your goals when you're writing. I actually use it. I set specific goals, whether it's a technical audience or it's just I'm just writing for telling a story or whatnot. And it actually adjusts my writing based off of what my settings are, what my target audience is. It's really kind of a cool feature. Have you ever written an email, especially to an executive, and you kind of go back and you reread it, and after you sent it, and you notice, well, some of the sentences are kind of incoherent. I can tell you, as a father of 4 and slightly sleep deprived, sometimes that happens. And I'll tell you one thing, Grammarly could literally fix this problem for you. You can give you the ability to trust what you send and write from now on. Now get this, 76% of surveyed Premium users now find writing more enjoyable, more fun because of Grammarly. For me, it really is. I can trust that what I send is correct and it's better written because I can lean on Grammarly. Now, tools are always better when they integrate with apps that we use every day. Grammarly integrates with Microsoft Word and Outlook. Plus, they have a ton of extensions for both Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox, and for your desktop. So you can use it on any app that maybe even doesn't have the ability to integrate with Grammarly. Plus, you can just use their website. You just go to Grammarly.com, log in, and you can start your documents right there. Do you travel a lot? Well, I do, and I can tell you right now that sometimes you have to do your work on public transit, and you want to be able to ensure that you're covered there as well. Well, Grammarly has you covered. It works with iOS and Android. For me, it's the Grammarly keyboard on iOS. It is a lifesaver. Autocomplete can sometimes really fail you. And like, for instance, go look at all the funny posts you see online about autocomplete fails. Well, Grammarly keyboard really can help you there and make it better and make it easier and catch you anytime before you send those things. Now, if you haven't tried Grammarly yet, go get it right now. It will literally make your writing life better. Go to Grammarly.com/enterprise to get 20% off your Grammarly premium account today. That's Grammarly.com/enterprise for 20% off your Grammarly premium account. And we thank Grammarly for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. All right, Mo, I'm going to throw it back to you.
So I was really happy to hear you characterize the Swiss cheese characterization that you used, because a lot of people will say, well, you can use cellular for your backup, and the reason I mentioned my cell booster is that in this 3-county area where I live, I describe our coverage as we don't have dead spots. We go from oases of cell coverage to oases. There's nothing like a uniform coverage. I was going to ask you about CBRS, but we'll move. I did want to get to the mapping because I know that you guys are working on that, and this is something that really bothers me. The federal government, the FCC, relies on self-reporting mapping of coverage maps from the different carriers. And we talked about this on this show actually 2 weeks ago. If you go to the AT&T website or Verizon website and look at their map of coverage just put my zip code in and then look at what the map is and versus the reality, they have nothing in common with each other in terms of what the actual coverage is. And I think that you guys are trying to help address that. Is this something that with the spread of all of the WISPs that you have across the country, that they can help and educate the government a little bit better about the realities of what broadband equity is not, what we really don't have right now?
Yeah, that's something that's also really important to us. One of the challenges that our members face as small businesses is, the reporting that is necessary to create the existing map, which, as you noted, is not very good. It takes a lot of time, and it's not a very intuitive process, which is why we believe that we need to have more granular data to be able to figure out where broadband is and where it isn't, and come up with solutions to address those places where it isn't, but also to make sure that it's appropriately calibrated for small businesses. And it's interesting you mentioned that going from oasis to oasis, it seems that DC these days is caught up in the promise of 5G, but one of the things that we worry about on the WISPA side is areas that have no G. It's
come to Texas. I'll show you lots of those.
There are lots of those, and in my travels visiting members and going to conferences, I find a lot of those areas. It's really frustrating, and we need better data on where broadband is and isn't. That's why we're partnering with a bunch of folks to try to tackle that problem.
So I did have one more other question. Mozilla, the Mozilla Foundation and the National Science Foundation got together a couple of years ago, and they had this. It was called the WINS Challenge, this wireless challenge. There were two sets of challenges there. One was broadband equities, helping serve the underserved. And again, for our listeners, I want to remind everybody that 20% of the people that we're talking about are children trying to go to school, and you cannot these days do schoolwork or college at all without access to good broadband. But so one challenge was for finding a way to get coverage or out there to the rural and in some of the dense urban areas. They sometimes have problems getting good coverage as well, or getting access. And then the second challenge was for solving the problems after natural disasters. And this seemed like I was a judge on this competition, and it was absolutely humanity reaffirming. It brings faith in humanity reaffirming in terms of where we might be going as a species, just because they were coming up with some really creative and good, innovative, and there were a lot of people there that really cared about figuring out a way to solve this problem. But it seems to me that this was a great way for government and private industry to work together and coordinate to help solve what is still a very serious and real problem. What other ways can we do this where we've got private and government putting their resources together to help solve some of these problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is going to have to be through partnerships. A lot of our folks, will go in. The way they get service into these small communities is to get on the town water tower and then beam a signal across the entire town from that water tower. And in order to be able to get that, they have to talk to the local government, and if there's no good service there, they're more than happy to give them access to that. And I think it ends up needing to be an all of the above approach, like you said. The private industry needs to do what it needs to do. Government needs to do what it needs to do, but even more so, working together makes things even better. I've seen a lot of innovative things done between municipalities and private providers who have come in and struck deals to gain access to that vertical infrastructure and provided service. One of our members, emailed me last summer before I was testifying before Congress and was like, look, we just want to serve our community. We view government as a partner. They give us access to their infrastructure. We give them free service to the police stations, to the fire station, to the schools and libraries in town. We view ourselves as part of the community. And given, like you said, how important broadband access is for all of these things, for schoolwork to telehealth to farming, everything is moving towards a more connected place. So absolutely necessary for everybody to come together on things like that. So wholeheartedly agree.
Right. Yeah. No, so I have one more question, and this has to do with one of the strategies that seems to me that it's been working very well is much the same way that we've solved the problem in across rural America, where most of us have electricity. So, and the way that's been accomplished is that a lot of us we're on an electric co-op. And
right.
So that same strategy, and sometimes it's even the electric co-op that becomes the broadband provider for the area. I think it's Tennessee Valley TVA that has created a co-op, and if the group that I'm thinking of at least has been so successful. They hire within the community, they train them, they're providing very good, solid connectivity for very reasonable prices, and they've made a point of going out and bringing in other communities and training them and teaching them how to set this up. I know that they've worked with a lot of Native American groups to do this. There are some states that have actively worked against this, that have put in legislation to keep that way. I think we have a couple of hundred of them across the U.S., but almost none in Texas, for example, because Texas has sort of come down against that kind of thing. Is this something that we can work with, or that your organization can work with legislators to help better educate them, make better choices for to help serve their constituents?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for opportunities to speak the good word about broadband and things that that states and communities can do to bring better broadband into their communities. And we were just talking about public-private partnerships. A lot of our members have found benefits on the private partnership side of things. So in working with electric co-ops who need to string fiber for, keeping track of their assets, and then our members will provide the retail service off of that fiber, either by running the fiber drops to the businesses or the residences, or to hang radios off of the poles that the fiber is running on. So there's a lot of interesting solutions out there, and we're just trying to get more of them out there.
Makes sense.
Godspeed to you, because goodness knows we need it.
All right. Thank you so much, Claude Aiken, for being here on the show. We really did enjoy it. Unfortunately, we're really running low on time. But before we close up, I wanted to give you kind of a chance to tell the folks at home where people can learn more about WISPA's efforts and maybe how they can get involved.
No, absolutely. So a good way to keep track of what we're doing is to go to our website, wispa.org. You can follow me on Twitter at CTAIKEN on Twitter. We have a newsletter you can sign up for to keep track of what's going on in the broadband space, and we just I love hearing from folks who have great ideas and want to learn more. So definitely reach out.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcasts, according to 9 out of 10 Grain Elevator Radios. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially our co-host in crime, starting with our favorite security journalist, Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks at home find you and all of your fabulous work?
Well, as always, people can find my work over at Dark Reading. I'll be pointing to that on Twitter and love to have conversations with readers on Twitter or Instagram. So feel free to hook up with me either place. I'd love to hear what you're interested in, what you're seeing out in the world of cybersecurity. As I said, starting to get ready for Black Hat, the sanity and cool comfort of Las Vegas in August will be here before we know it. And would love to know from you what you would like us to cover out there. What questions would you like to see answered? Let me know, and we'll see you on the interwebs.
Fantastic. We also want to thank our other enterprise expert and co-host in crime, Heather Moe Williams. Heather, where can folks find you and all of your work?
Well, on Twitter, I'm at Mo Better Wi-Fi, and you guys can ping me anytime. I love to hear from people. In Vegas, you can look me up at the Knock, and we'll give you a tour. Come out for Black Hat. Maybe Curtis will have some time to chat with us too. And we've been getting ready for Black Hats for the last 4 months now, since Black Hat Asia ended, I think is when we start ramping that up. I did want to mention, I wore this T-shirt today just so I would remember, there is no such thing as a natural disaster season, but we certainly have put both feet into it already. So if anybody's interested in taking their IT skills to the MacGyver level, go to itdrc.org, and we've just had 300 tornadoes of significant size in the last month. Hurricane season is starting, and that we're going to have the opportunity to go out and run some comms for some yet other people who have broadband challenges. So.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mo. Well, also, we have to thank you you have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each every week. You watch and listen to our show. You subscribe to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news. And to do that, go right now to our show page, to twit.tv/Twyat. There you'll see all the amazing back episodes, plus all the show notes, co-host information, guest information, and links to the stories we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll actually get those helpful download and subscribe links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version, or your H2 video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices. It really is the best way to get your enterprise IT news for each week. And of course, after you subscribe, you gotta share it with your friends and family and your coworkers, absolutely, because this is the best way to support us and allow us to keep doing your enterprise news each and every week. So go ahead and share. Sharing is caring. Now, after you subscribe, of course, we do the show live each and every week, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays. That's at live.twit.tv. And if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room as well. We have a really great chat room and a couple really great characters in there. They give us some amazing content this time as well to kind of ask and talk to our guest about, as well as all the topics we did during the show. So go ahead and jump in there at irc.twit.tv. We'll great to have you in there. Of course, don't forget, we do the show each and every week. And if you want to be part of it, be part of the chat room. Now, don't forget, you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. You can get to see what I do my normally daily week at work at Microsoft. Especially, you can go check out dev.office.com. You can see all the latest and greatest ways to actually extend and make Office more productive for you. That's my team there. Now, if you also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa, they continue to support us each and every week to This Week in Enterprise Tech, and we couldn't do this show without them. Of course, we have to thank all of our engineers at Twit. Thank you so much for all of your support. Of course, we have to thank our loyal producer, Mr. Brian Cheebert. He's our tireless producer. He does all of the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do the show without him. Now, before we sign out, we also thank our TD for today, Victor. Victor, you know the tradition. What was the topic of today's show?
I got two things today. So One, we got a long ways to go as far as broadband in the U.S., something we lose sight of here in California. The other thing for Mo, whether it's like fake news or whatever, there ain't no hiding your lying eyes from Mo.
Indeed, there really is nothing hiding from Mo, for sure. But I would say you're super, super close. It would be definitely Grain Elevator Radios, but I think you were so close that maybe we'll give you a star for this week. So
on the tip
maybe
of my
next
tongue.
week you'll get it closer. We'll see. We'll see. And until next time, I'm Lou MARESCA, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Cheebert, aka Brian Chi, and this is a Twyat After School Special. We've been talking in this series about doing VoIP troubleshooting. A lot of us are transitioning. We have VoIP infrastructure that we need to deal with. So what we thought we'd do in this, we being Tim Titus, CTO of Past Solutions, is deal with common VoIP problems, define what causes it, how to find it, and then, of course, how to resolve it. So, Tim, you're my man. Let's go talk about voice over IP one-way audio problems.
Huh? What? Oh, there's nothing coming from my side. I didn't hear you. That's what you have when you have one-way audio. You have one side hearing the other, and the other side hears nothing. I think we've all been on a few phone calls that sound like that. And really, it's frustrating because you don't even know the other person's listening. I've been on phone calls before where I'll admit I would have just talked and talked for 5 and 10 minutes long, and the other person's like trying to say all sorts of stuff, trying to interrupt me, and I just keep going on because I can't hear them. So this ends up leading to a lot of frustrated users when they end up having this problem happen to them.
Okay. We're obviously talking about voice over IP. We're in the digital age. What are the things we need to look for? What causes one-way audio?
So there's two ways to think about one-way audio. If you make a phone call and that phone call immediately gets established and you can't hear the other side, but the other person can hear you just fine, that usually means there's a configuration problem, because you're getting your packets out to them, but their packets are not making it back to your handset. And so that's a configuration problem, because it happens guaranteed all the time. You hang up, you make the call again, it happens again, and it always happens. You just can't hear the other side. And so that always happening leads you to say, go look at your firewalls. Go look at how those firewalls are configured to handle VoIP, because they're dropping 100% of the packets. Now, the second type of problem you can have that's one-way audio is you can be on a phone call and it's working just fine. You're talking to the other person, you're hearing them just fine, and then all of a sudden they drop. And you're like, hello, what happened? Are you still there? And you're trying to find out if they're still connected, and you're wondering, well, what happened? That's not a firewall problem, because you were talking before just fine. The configuration of the firewall, I would say, is perfect. What typically happens in that environment where calls drop just right in the middle is either you have too much packet loss, and so the packets that were going from their phone to you, they drop too many of those, and you drop that half of the call. If you remember back in the very first segment, we talked about how there are two separate voice streams. You can have one of those drop and the other one stays up. Doesn't always happen, because usually if there's packet loss, it's going to affect both sides. But if you have just enough packet loss in one direction, one side drops the call and that person drops off, and you're just there kind of on your own, where the other person can hear you, but you can't hear them. So it's packet loss if it happens midstream, or it's a configuration problem if it happens immediately upon the call being established.
So don't cross the streams? Okay.
Exactly.
In your experience, are some of these VoIP systems smart enough to rebuild that lost connection, or should we just hang up and try again?
So that's the sad thing is honestly, you're giving a feature request to somebody who can't fix it. But the folks who build these phone systems, they ought to be able to rebuild the call and rebuild it dynamically. So far, at this point of the game, I haven't found any company that has that dynamic rebuild the call stream if it has too much packet loss. Typically, if you have one-way audio, you hang up the call, reestablish the call. Either it takes a different route path, or again, if it's that configuration error, you're just not going to get passed through that until it's fixed. But if it's packet loss, the overutilization or the problems related to packet loss, those problems might have gone away by the time you reestablish the call. So it's sadly, it's a hang up, try the call again, and you'll probably be fine.
Okay, well, that's all fine and good, but my boss he doesn't like this. What kind of tools can I get that can help me resolve this so that I can at least reduce the occurrences?
So what you want to do is you want to look at your network. You want to look at the interfaces on your network. You want to look at the performance of your network. You can use monitoring software to go out and collect error counters on interfaces, performance counters on interfaces, QoS statistics on interfaces, performance on the switch, on the router, CPU, memory, all of that sort of stuff. And you can go out and build those tools to collect that amount of visibility. That's one mechanism for doing that. There's a number of open source tools you can use to collect the information. Part of the hard part is you have to know what to collect. If you think about it, every switch, every interface, every router, and every interface, there are 20, 25 different error counters on every one of those interfaces. That's a lot of reasons you could drop packets. That's a lot of reasons you could buffer packets. Monitoring software today typically doesn't collect that information. So you have to go manually configure to collect the information to see where are we dropping packets, where are we buffering packets. And so it's that manual configuration that you need to build to get that visibility into the environment.
So, This is going to be my common theme at the end of every segment. It sounds like know your network. Do that honest inventory is going to go a long way to solving problems like voice over IP one-way audio.
Yeah. You have a good network diagram. You understand your network. You understand where you're dropping packets, why you're dropping packets. And this is some of the reason why I founded the company, is to solve this problem of packet loss, to be able to tell you here's where and when and why you're dropping packets, so that you're not having to spend weeks or months trying to configure monitoring software to go collect the error counters. We go collect the error counters for you automatically. Doesn't make any difference what model of switch or router. We scoop up the information, analyze it, and help tell you here's where you're dropping packets, here's why you're dropping packets, and also include a call simulator to be able to show, are you dropping packets going outbound? Are you dropping packets coming inbound? And also, where are those packets being dropped, so that you can see this is what's affecting my VoIP environment.
Super cool. And we've been talking to Tim Titus, CTO of Path Solutions, and we've been talking about what kinds of things can mess up your voice over IP system. And this has been a Twiat after school special, and the whole idea behind these is give you tools to help you do your job better. It's not necessarily a full portion of Twiat, because people don't want us to make the episodes any longer, but extra tools, something for the after school. Anyway, this has been Cheebert, and I've been talking about voice over IP one-way audio problems. Next time, we're going to talk about what happens when your voice calls are garbled.